With us today is a great panel of speakers, people that have gone ahead of us. And as we were thinking about this webinar, actually what prompted us to think about having this conversation was, some of the issues that we are seeing, especially among the young lawyers, concerning the challenges they are facing as they are navigating through the career ladder from the student level to pupillage, KSL, and then you are just newly admitted, and that kind of progression. We have seen people express maybe some frustrations or challenges that they're experiencing. And we thought that it would be a great idea to convene a panel that can address and tackle some of these challenges for us to learn. And the best people to learn from are people that have walked the path. So, ladies and gentlemen, without much ado, allow me to give our seniors a second or two to introduce themselves, and then I'm going to give us directions on how we're going to proceed.
All right. Yeah, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. As I've been introduced, my name is Steve Mallowah. I'm a partner at Triple OK Law, and I'm a partner in the corporate and commercial team. But importantly, I've been in practice for, post-admission, roughly 30 years. Actually, I'm in my 31st year of practice. And of the 30 years, half of it has been in private practice, half of it has been in public service, in executive positions in the public service. So I'm sure my bio is available somewhere online on LinkedIn and so on. So I'll be happy to share some ideas with you this afternoon. We were just going to sort of keep it fairly informal. I have a short presentation, which is about 10 minutes. We'll see whether, if I may want to just go through it. It's only 10 slides. So just to sort of set a scene, but let's see how that proceeds. But happy to see so many of you on the webinar. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mr. Njeru, you can do a brief introduction.
Thank you, Njoki. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Senior Mallowah. My name is Njeru Muthoni. I am actually a young advocate. I am not mid-bar by any stretch. I am post-admission or doing my 4th year in practice. I will be doing my 5th from July of next year. So I practice in the name and style of M&W and Advocates LLP, where I am a partner. It's in Westlands, and we mostly do civil litigation, constitutional matters, and a bit of sports law. So thank you for the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to sharing knowledge and learning from everyone else.
This is going to be a panel discussion, so I'm going to be asking questions to the panel, and I'm going to be giving them a chance to answer. And also, I'm going to open up the forum to the audience to answer their questions. To ask their questions, just to give each panelist a few minutes, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, to make their brief presentation.
Right. Sorry, Njeru, do you want me to go first, or do you want to say a few things and then I can queue up my presentation?
You can go first, Senior.
Now, let me see if I can just put up it's a very, very sort of brief overview of the thematic areas that we're going to talk about. So navigating the legal profession. So like I said, so that's what we want to talk about today, and essentially want to get a few insights into, career growth, a few issues to do with ethics, and of course, about building resilience. So like I said, obviously, I've been in this in practice for quite a while, and so it's the time does go fairly fast. I sort of sometimes find it hard to believe that it's been that long, but the time does go. And one of the things which is important to appreciate about this profession is that success in the legal profession is a function of time. And it is almost impossible to get overnight success. We know that in the era of course, social media, and of course, the fact that, trials are now being televised and so on, you see young lawyers appearing in maybe, in a presidential petition, and everybody raves about, oh, that lawyer was so intelligent and so wonderful. But unfortunately, that's not what defines success in the profession. So you may have your one moment in the sun and you shine, but unfortunately, that may not translate into whether it's financial or professional success, right? That's not what clients are going to be attracted to. But having said that, there are also some lawyers, of course, who utilize the medium of television or social media, of course, as a way of promoting themselves. And there are examples out there, and they seem to have done it very successfully. But of course, going very close to or crossing the line when it comes to ethical issues. So it's one of those things where, again, it's something you really have to think about. But it's something we'll discuss as we go forward. Okay, so just going very quickly through this presentation. Now, first of all, for those of you who write legal opinions or provide legal opinions, of course, you do know that one of the important things that lawyers must always do is they must issue disclaimers when they are not giving legal advice. So this is just boilerplate. It has nothing to do with what I think about the audience. It's just that you always disclaim as a professional, unless you're in an advocate-client relationship with somebody, you don't really want to go around giving advice that people may rely on. And if it goes wrong, they have they want to sue you, yet they haven't paid you. So just ignore the disclaimer. So just background thoughts about the legal profession. So obviously, what we probably are going to discuss is just, how the legal profession is today. What are the challenges, the opportunities? What makes this profession so unique, right? It's a profession, yes, advocacy, it's a business, but at the same time, you're bound by a very strong code of ethics, okay? So unlike, somebody who operates matatus who can literally do whatever they want, more or less, right? As a lawyer, you are trying to make money, but within a very strictly regulated environment. The do's and the don'ts, the things that you can do, things that you can't do, how you operate with your clients, how you relate to them, how you relate to the court. All this is very highly regulated, right? So you have to navigate your ability to make money within this constrained environment. So obviously, we want to look at what does it take to build a successful career, whatever success means, okay? Success can be defined in many ways. But you want to be successful, however you define it. You want to be resilient in the sense that you're there for a long time. You're not a flash in the pan. You're up today and then the next day you've been forgotten about, or you end up in jail or something has happened to you, because you've breached a code of ethics. So that's what essentially, we want to sort of try to build on. Now, so obviously, I mean, we start off from somewhere. You start from, as a young lawyer straight out of the law school, and you want to grow, because the whole idea is about growth, right? You're not going to remain a young lawyer forever or a newly admitted lawyer forever. You must grow, because if you don't grow, then you're heading nowhere. Okay, so in the path to growth, there are things that you must do to achieve this growth. Okay, and we're going to talk about some of these things, which include, of course, setting goals for yourself, looking for the right mentors. These are some of the tools that one would use for purposes of career progression. Okay, telling yourself that in so many, in a year from today, 2 years from today, 5 years from today, okay, I want to achieve this. What do I need to do to achieve that? Okay. Then, of course, you have to have the right tools to overcome all the challenges that face young lawyers. Now, the thing about the legal profession in Kenya is very interesting in the sense that, I'm sure young lawyers feel that they're overworked, but there are other jurisdictions where young lawyers are really driven very hard. The young trainee lawyers, newly admitted lawyers are used aggressively by law firms. And so they tend to work very long hours, do a lot of research, a lot of drafting and so on. So you want to be able to also balance work and your life as well. So again, you need tools for that, how to manage your time effectively so that you're not constantly working, you're not leaving the office at midnight and so on. And so that's quite important, okay? And then what are the things you need to do to create opportunities for growth? So again, we'll come back to these topics, obviously, in the Q&A, but the thing about growth is that it has to be deliberative. Some people get lucky. They don't plan, but things work out for them. But please, if you're going to rely on luck, your life that's way too much of a risk, right? It makes more sense to plan, right, about how you want to grow. So you want to do certain things that help you to grow, to be proactive in terms of the things that you need to do to make yourself advance. You need more qualifications. You need to read more. You need to acquire a certain skill. Okay. Do you need to get a certain type of mentor that will guide you in the direction that you want to go? And so these are challenges that you'll face, obviously, as a young lawyer, trying to think of how do I move from where I am. But the point is to be deliberative, to really think about it. And of course, some of the things you want to do, of course, is to volunteer to do things, the hard things. If somebody, a senior or somebody asks you, or asks, I need somebody to do some work for me over the weekend, or to do some research for me, or to draft something for me, right? You want to be the person who volunteers, who puts your hand up and says, I can help you do that, okay? You know that one of your colleagues is working on something which is particularly difficult. You go and ask, can I help? Is there something that I can do? Can I accompany you to court? Can I write the notes? Can I sit in the meeting and scribe, do the minutes of meetings and so on? Okay. So those are your issues around growth. Ethics cannot be answered. I've talked about ethics, understanding your ethical obligations, and knowing, right, that ethics in this profession are non-negotiable. You can only get away with preaching ethics for so long before it catches up with you. Okay, you can do it once, twice, you get away with it, you make some money, you think that you're successful, but sooner or later, word of mouth, this is an unethical lawyer, this is an unscrupulous lawyer, and that is the end of that. Okay, so for you to be around for a long time, to have longevity, ethics is completely critical. I talked about law as a business, that you're trying to make money, you're trying to be successful. If you define success by financial success, but even if you don't define it by financial success, at the end of the day, you have to make a living, right? And the practice of law is how you have chosen to make a living. You could have been a matatu driver, you could have been a pilot, you could have been a doctor, anything, but you choose the law. And so you must have an entrepreneurial mindset, okay? For you to grow, you must think like a business person. So you may start your own law firm, okay? If you're starting your own law firm, you have to have a business plan. You have to think about how you're going to attract clients, what is going to be a niche, what is going to be a unique selling point, okay? How are you going to manage the resources? Are you able to pay your staff? Are you going to? So again, when it comes to law as a business, an additional skill set that you must have is this entrepreneurial mindset. So it's no good being the top lawyer in constitutional law when you cannot manage your office. Okay. Sooner or later, your office will come to a grind. Your landlord will be chasing you. Staff will be leaving because you can't pay them, and so on. Okay. So again, another skill set you'll have to get is this entrepreneurial mindset. If you are not born with it, please read it in a book. You are not born knowing the law, you learned it. Same thing with entrepreneurial skills. You can learn them. Online courses, enroll for an MBA, do something to acquire these courses. And they're available out there. Okay. Resilience, again, making sure that you can overcome setbacks. Because in your career, you'll go through many setbacks. If you're in employment, you may be overlooked for promotions. You may not make a partnership. All sorts of things can happen. You may open your law firm and it collapses and you have to look for employment, go back to employment. Clients will let you down. They don't pay you. All sorts of things happen. But the idea is you learn from those mistakes, from those failures. You don't allow them to define you. Failure should not define you. It should just be a learning opportunity. Okay, next time I will do this better. Next time I will, I won't make the same mistake again. And so persistence, making sure that you persist. Okay, there's an area of law that you've decided this is where I want to pursue. I want to be a tax lawyer. Tax is complicated, right? But nonetheless, it is not impossible. I will plug away at it until I understand it. Environmental law, tech law, AI, whatever you name it. Okay, but it's about persistence. You open your office, the clients are not coming as quickly as you had hoped. You persevere. You find a way of continuing. Okay, so personal strength, mental strength is very, very important in this profession. You cannot be mentally fragile as a lawyer. Okay, lots of conversations around mental health issues, but the reality is that the practice of law does require a certain amount of personal strength. Okay, lawyers are not the most sentimental people in the world. You may have worked for very tough seniors, tough bosses who don't really have time to babysit you and so on. And these are just things that you have to deal with. You can't go around crying and saying, oh, this thing is really tough and so on. So building resilience. Personal branding, we're going to talk about again, I'm sure. But you must think of yourself as a brand for purposes of growth. Okay. What am I good at? What are the areas that I believe I can really sell myself? Okay. If I say that I'm an authority on constitutional law, am I that authority? Is this my area? Okay. And once you identify that, you can really push and plug social media, etc., publish articles, go speaking engagements, network, etc. Okay. But the idea is to try and stand out to be recognized as an authority. Okay. So you look at an area and say, I am going to be an authority in this area. Okay. The era of the lawyer who's a jack of all trades is now actually diminishing. Okay. The idea of a generalist practicing somewhere in town and taking everything that comes along, unfortunately, may not be there for much longer. So branding, marketing, standing out. Then, of course, alternative careers. There are so many options available to lawyers now. If you look at a good number of the large corporates in Kenya, whether listed on the stock exchange and so on, you'll find that a good number of CEOs actually have legal backgrounds. Okay, they started off as lawyers. A very good number of them, bank managers, captains of industry, have a law degree somewhere in their background. Same thing with, unfortunately, in politics. Lawyers are overrepresented in politics. Most of the vocal politicians tend to have a legal background. But in public service, in administration, and so on, you'll find lawyers represented. In the NGO world, okay, policy advisory, regulatory compliance, and so on. So again, the alternative career paths, if you feel this mainstream practice is too difficult, there are always those other options, civil society, the judicial service, and so on. And then, of course, personal development, right? So your soft skills, your ability to negotiate, to communicate, to empathize, to listen, and so on and so forth. These are skills, okay? Some people have them naturally, some people don't. If you don't have soft skills, you can learn them, right? You can watch videos, you can read books, you can enroll in a course and so on, okay? But these are skills that are useful, especially when you're client facing. So you want to acquire some of these skills to enable you to relate better with clients, with colleagues, and so on, okay? And there are many ways of doing this. Of course, personal development is not just about soft skills, but developing that personal mission statement, a vision statement, these things that people think are a big joke. You hear about people, putting up vision boards and journaling and so on and so forth. But the sad reality is that these things actually work, okay? The idea of putting a vision board up to sort of vision out your growth process, journaling, writing down what happened to you today, what your hopes, aspirations are, etc. These are all things which are useful, tried and tested. So, part of my main takeaways from this, obviously, is that growing in this profession and any other profession requires intentional action, okay, and some resilience. You cannot just sit, it's like you're not a mushroom, like somehow with sunlight and water, you'll just somehow grow, okay? You actually have to be intentional about the things that you want to do if you want to grow, okay? Or at least if you want to grow fast. You could sit back like a civil servant and wait for every few years you get a promotion, every year you get an increment, and do absolutely nothing. And after 20 years, you'll be wondering, why haven't I moved? Okay. So intentional action, resilience, ethics and reputation, not negotiable at all. Entrepreneurship, branding, adaptability, personal development. Okay. So you grow yourself, you will grow in the profession. And of course, none of you will walk the same journey. All of us will walk very different journeys. I started off in private practice. I went into public service, came out of public service, went back into private practice, and so on. But people have different journeys. So you look for mentors, you learn continuously. You never stop learning, okay? You stick to your value system. Once you know your values, you stick to them, okay? You set out your career goals, okay, based on what you want to achieve, and you work on it continuously, right? There's no shortcut, okay? Some of you may be lucky, you're born, your father is a president, you may get certain advantages, but not everybody wins the birth lottery, okay? So most of us have to actually work for success, okay? So that's basically it on this opening presentation. And we can take it from there.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Senior, for that. Quite insightful. You've covered quite a lot. I was taking notes. I'll move on to the next panelist. Mr. Njeru, do you have any opening remarks you'd like to make?
Yes, Njoki. First of all, Senior, that was a great presentation. I'm now thinking twice about having to go second, but I'll do my best. I'm a practitioner myself, so throughout my presentation, I'll have a bias towards young advocates who are setting up their own practices rather than the wholesome practice, which I feel Senior has really covered. under very different facets of the law, whether it's practice, whether it's growth, whether it's time management and all of that. So I'll just move right ahead and give my insights on, based on mostly experience, on setting up practice. So the first thing I would advise a young lawyer to have before venturing out to practice would be a business plan. Because yes, the law is about learning and reading and drafting and jurisprudence and all of that. However, law essentially is a business. The reason most of us do it is as a way to make a living. So that said, most lawyers most young lawyers rather, make the mistake of getting into the practice of law without having the business at the back of their minds. So when they're setting up or when they're starting or venturing out on their own or whatever, they're thinking about how great of a lawyer they want to be, how they're going to be well read, how articulate they're going to be, how the submissions are going to be well written and all of that. And that's all well and good. However, you could be the brightest lawyer in this country. However, you will still be frustrated by the practice if you do not have the business mind at hand. So once you get the business plan, which is where you're going to get the money to set up your law firm, how you'll sustain your office, how you'll sustain your employees, how you'll sustain the files, because the files have to be paid somehow for them to move, then you create a structure. And I find that a lot of young lawyers, myself included, really suffer from, especially early on, from lack of a proper structure. And by structure, I mean, one, there has to be a management structure. Because whether you're a sole practitioner, whether you work in a law firm, whether you have a partner in a partnership, there has to be first a management structure. There has to be a person who runs the day-to-day of the office. There has to be a person who is in charge of getting supplies in the office, in charge of maybe assigning cases, in charge of maybe contacting clients. There has to be that sort of structure so that there is order. Otherwise, you'll find that it will be a case of pointing fingers, especially in a partnership, or a case of work not getting done. And the next structure I would advise on is a practice structure. And this is very important because for young lawyers, we have this tendency to be jacks of all trade, and there's nothing wrong with that. However, you cannot grasp everything at once. So especially when you're part of a larger team or you're venturing out on your own, you need to know where you excel at and make that your niche. So if you're a sole practitioner and you find that criminal law is what works for you, it would not, again, make sense for you to start learning something completely different. And there's something that you can start and build from. So once you have that practice structure, especially in a larger team, you can diversify and have some other people handling debt collection, other people handling commercial transactions, and it will be easy to move once there's that kind of practice structure. So, and you see it even in cases where when lawyers are submitting, when they're highlighting submissions on very different areas, they divide the work depending on who is good at what. So that just tells you that for practice to thrive, you sort of have to create a niche. So to avoid belaboring the point, sorry, I'll move on to the third structure in my view, which is a supervisory structure, which is there has to be someone who, first of all, checks your work so that your work doesn't go out there with minor mistakes that cost you a lot in cases. And with clients, small mistakes can mean losing clients. And as young lawyers, we can't afford to be losing clients because in the first place, you don't start out with a lot of clients. So you don't want your affidavit to go out there and not commissioned, or it's been commissioned by a quack, or just anything of that sort, or you've quoted the law, the wrong law, or you've just made any minor mistake that can be checked by someone else and then acted upon. So that supervisory structure is always key, so that you have people, one, checking your work, two, checking your practice style, and three, even checking your management style, because part of what makes and breaks offices, as Senior pointed out in his presentation, is that you could have a senior or a boss who is not good with employees, who is maybe very harsh. So there needs to be very, very important checks in that front, so that you're able to ascertain what is working and what is not working. Because, as the saying goes, two heads are better than one. So, secondly, is just under the limb of setting up practice, I will just say that it is important to always adhere to the laws. To the laws of the land, which is how you one set up different types of farms. How you set up a sole proprietorship is different from how you set up an LLP, how you set up a partnership, how you register it, how you wind it up if it is not working. So all of those, I will not want to get into that so much, because it's information you can get when you go online and actually read. You can read the Companies Act, you can read the Partnership Act, you can read the Law Society of Kenya regulations and the Act and all of that. So I think that is essentially um, uh, uh, starting up a law firm 101. Then in that, we also have a bit of office administration and a bit of how you deal with clients. So all of that just comes into how a young lawyer should package himself when you're starting out, when you're venturing out, because you'll find that as a young lawyer, when you're working in a big firm, there are structures in place for you to just follow. So it's just upon you to be diligent and work. However, when you're venturing out on your own, or when you're part of a small firm, it's important to have these things at the back of your mind, so that your practice thrives. Then, lastly, as part of this wholesome introduction, I'll just deal with just for a young lawyer, how important it is to understand the legal dynamics and the different trends, because most lawyers out here, they grapple with, one, getting clients, and two, making money in practice. So there's no one shoe fits all answer to this, but in my view, it is important for young lawyers to think about areas that are emerging, areas that could easily get them clients who are within their, I don't want to say age bracket, but within their comprehension of society. And this is what I mean. For a young lawyer, for example, if you get into something like sports law, you'll find most athletes are people you can resonate with, they're your age mates. So it's somewhere you can get work easier than other spaces which are dominated by the bigger firms, by the bigger lawyers. When you think about entertainment law, you'll find that most of these creators, most of these artists are people your age, are people you can resonate with, are people who will not be accessible to the senior bar, but will be accessible to you as a young lawyer. So that's also a niche area that you can cultivate. Number three, when it comes to emerging issues of technology law, climate change, these are issues that sort of come up and need to be grasped by the earliest lawyers who get into that field, because they can understand it better than those who will get into it later. And if Senior can attest to this, because he's been in the practice for a while, when employment law was catching on in Kenya, there wasn't a lot of advocates. From my reading and interaction with seniors, there wasn't a lot of advocates who took up employment law. So when it really blew up, the advocates who had understood that terrain really made a lot of money from employment law. So once you have this upcoming thematic areas on the law, it's always good to keep yourself apprised with the new developments, the new judgments. So it's always important as a young lawyer to be ahead of the curve, be the person always jumping on what is relevant in society, because what is relevant is what will pay you, and what is relevant is what will bring clients to your doorstep. Those are my opening remarks in a nutshell.
Thank you so much, Senior, for those insights. I like that you have delved into the dynamics of starting a law practice, because I'm sure in the forum here we have quite a number of us who are probably considering starting a private practice, or they're already in it at their baby stage of it. So what we have heard from our seniors is, I would say, a general overview of what the questions that I would be anticipating. And so in the next session, we would be going into the grain of it. At this point, I will ask us to send our questions on the chat. I will start with Senior Mallowah. My first question for you is that you've had years of experience in the legal profession. Would you kindly share with us the single most important lesson that you've learned about career growth that you wish you knew earlier in your 35 years of practice?
Right. Yeah. Okay. So one of the things which I think one gets to learn over time is that the practice of law, just like although people think that law is something very clinical and very, very dispassionate, ultimately the practice of law is about relationships. And a lot of lawyers don't invest enough in the relationship side of the of practice in terms of building relationships with clients. And of course, traditionally, when there were very few law firms and very few lawyers, lawyers could afford to be, very arrogant and dismissive, and and be very, sort of take the intellectual high ground and so on. But increasingly now you find that even for corporate clients, they would prefer to deal with lawyers who are relatable to them. And so there was a time, I've seen practice evolve where there were certain law firms that would get work just by virtue of, they had some people who were considered to be, authorities in certain areas, whether because of their race or whatever it was. But they could be very rude, very dismissive, some of these seniors. And yet, but now you have to spend a lot of time building relationships with clients, doing a lot of sort of pro bono, work, volunteer work, training, offering training, issuing sort of all these, legal updates and so on to clients, value addition, so that you become useful. Okay. So it's about now the advocate being useful to the client, right? And constantly demonstrating your usefulness to the client, so that the lawyer is not seen as a necessary evil, that, oh gosh, we have to get a lawyer for this, or we have to deal with a lawyer. But they actually feel that we have a difficulty, we have a challenge. I can pick up the phone, I can call up, our lawyers, and they can give us some quick advice on the phone and so on. So that evolution now has actually happened, that law firms now and lawyers must invest in relationships. And related to that now is that even things like negotiating fees, there was a time when fees were a matter of take it or leave it, remuneration order, take it or leave it. I have very strong views against the remuneration order, by the way, because I think it's something that it's past its usefulness and needs to be done away with. But even how you negotiate fees now is a skill, okay? And there are actually courses out there that teach you how to negotiate fees with clients so that you shift the conversation from a money conversation to a value conversation, right? So you're actually telling the client, this is the value that I'm offering you for this amount of money, as opposed to this is what I'm doing for you paying me X amount, right? So there's been a shift in conversations. So a lot of these very interesting developments that have happened over time.
All right. Thank you, Simon, for that comprehensive answer. My next question is directed to Senior Njeru. Unlike couple of years ago when the legal practice was very scarcely populated, if you may, in terms of competition. Right now, we would say that the legal profession is somewhat flooded. And as someone who has just started your practice, how would you advise for us who are, coming after you, following the same path, in light of the fact that, there are so many of us out here, we are going out to fish, to hunt the same clients, in light of the traditional kind of practice, the litigation kind of practice and, conveyancing. You understand when I say that traditional practice. So in light of that, in that context that we are so many of us, you want to start a law firm, and the traditional areas of practice in terms of litigation and conveyancing, we are hunting the same clients. So in your experience, how can someone who is starting out their private practice, or if not even necessarily legal private practice, but you're starting out your let's put it into private practice because you are into private practice. How would you find your voice in a competitive field? And how do you stay relevant in this profession, which is ever evolving?
I think the first thing is that I reject that the notion that the legal market is flooded, and that's just my opinion. I think that we are 20,000 of us who are registered as lawyers and practicing as such. These 20,000 people are supposed to serve a population of 45 million. So when you think about those dynamics, even if you think about the clients who are able to pay, it does not tally with the numbers because not all the 20,000 are in private practice. So I'd say the cake is big enough for everybody. It is just that due to the ever-growing numbers, there is that fear that we may be becoming too many, and yet there's not enough clients to meet our needs as lawyers. However, moving on, I would say that as a young lawyer, if you start your own practice and you decide I am doing conventional practice and your planning is proper, your office management is okay, your structures are there, and you delve into either debt collection, running down matters, company registrations, and all of that, you will get clients because everybody who sets up properly will get clients. Now, the difference is, will you get to where you need to go, which is establishing yourself as very different and distinct? Because you're competing against the likes of Senior here, who is at Triple OK. Triple OK is one of the biggest firms in this country. That is your competition. And if you want to do the same things they do, and if you want to get into the same environment they do, then you best be prepared or plan to do twice as much as them just to get half of what they have. So in my view, it is important also for us as young lawyers to be very creative in terms of one, how we package ourselves, because how you package yourself is what goes out to everyone else. And I mean it in the very small things. If you're meeting a client, how exactly are you presenting yourself to this client? if it gets to a question of discussing fees, as seniors, as senior just pointed out, are you discussing fees in terms of money, or are you discussing fees in terms of the value that you're bringing to the table? So, which goes now to say that as a young lawyer, whether it is in the style you practice, whether it is in how you address court, whether it is in your pleadings, there has to be a way you stand out. It might not just be you've picked maybe something like technology law or what else? Fintech law. It can just be as easy as you just package yourself differently to everyone else. So you just have to find that thing that you're good at, whether it's a different area of practice, whether it's your outreach to clients, because there's for example, if you're a lawyer and you utilize social media more than the rest of the other law firms, because that is where most law firms usually lack. They usually don't know how to go out there and source clients on the internet. They just depend on their website to bring them clients and all of that. If you can just pick one thing that just defines you, then it can move from a question of is the market saturated? Am I going to find work? To a question of you're a person, you're creating a brand, you're known for this, and this is what sets you apart.
Great. I like that response. What I am picking from you is that you need to understand the changing generations and know how to interact or how to net your potential clients. And when you talked about social media, you know that touches on marketing and branding. And from my own observation, I have seen that currently, if you are not in touch with the social world, you may not be able to reach those clients that you desire to have. And I'm sorry for this, but I find a lot of those really old firms, those lawyers that have been there for so long, that's a place they are missing out on, because these days people are looking for information on LinkedIn. So you find someone contacting you and they found you on LinkedIn. People are looking for information. You go on LinkedIn, you read an article, you're like, this lawyer is established as an authority in this area. Just like any other commodity, I like that Senior Mallowah talked about having an entrepreneurial mindset as a lawyer, because that is one skill that we are never taught in school as lawyers. So when you're starting your practice, you come here and you realize, a law firm is a business, and no one taught you entrepreneurship. So part of having that entrepreneurial mindset is knowing where are your clients. So just like any other commodity or product, these days, if you're looking for something, you'll go on Instagram and look, okay, I want a shoe, even to the things as who can do my hair for the ladies. So even for legal services, if you're not visible in the social media world, I think you might be missing out. So thank you for that insight. Mr. Mallowah, I'm going to move to the next question is for you. I would like you to address a certain, concern, especially for us lawyers who are, really young into the profession. We are just because I understand this forum has a variety of people, from students, there are people in KSL, there are people who have just finished KSL, others are newly admitted, others are just, they are admitted, they're waiting, they're looking for jobs. So there's that phase in your legal progression that I would call, what in the world sense they call a midlife crisis. You were in sort of a crisis, trying to find ground. So, and I see a lot of us young lawyers, we experience frustrations. We are just fresh from Kenya School of Law, you've been newly admitted, you are looking for a job, you have expectations. So there's this thing about law students, especially when they're still in law school, they have this mindset that when they go out, their life is going to present them with opportunities on a silver platter. So how do you prepare for that? Because when you come to the ground, you realize, things are different. And that grind can sometimes be a bit frustrating. And it's not to mean that you are not, intellectually able. It's not that your papers are not good. But when you come here, there's quite a struggle. So that transition from being a student to establishing yourself in the legal profession, finding your place, there's a lot of instability. So I know I've said a lot of things. I hope you will capture what to address, but I wanted to paint a picture of what that situation, or it's more like a dilemma for young lawyers looks like. So as you answer this question, I would like you to specifically address students. So how do you prepare yourself to navigate or to establish yourself while you're still in school? How do you prepare now for your legal journey after school? Or, some of us, we just went through school and we were hoping that once we are done, we're going to figure it out. As well, there are students, there are people who, while they were students, they had figured out a path. Then they come out here and it didn't work. So there's also that frustration. So how do you handle that? How do you strike that balance of, having an idea, having a plan, having a vision, and managing your expectation in terms of how your legal journey is going to look like, how long it's going to take for you to be established, and even which path you are going to take. And yes, just address that scenario, having in mind the students, having in mind the pupil who's looking for pupillage and they've been out there for 6 months and no one wants to take them in, that frustration, addressing the person who they thought they are a tax guru and out here there seem to be no space for them. And now the other person now who's a newly admitted advocate and they don't seem to find a place. And there is another one who has just decided, okay, I've just finished school, let me start my own farm. And they realize this jungle is a bit hostile. So, Asine Mallowah, I hope you have been able to capture my question, as intricate as it was.
Yeah, well, now, so yes, I mean, I sort of understand your question, but there's no easy way to address this, and there's no easy way to soft land it. The legal profession does not operate in a vacuum. So law, by its very nature, is a service. It's a service profession, right? So people don't go to law school and learn law just for the sake of acquiring legal knowledge, right? That, I just want to get a law degree or become an advocate, and then that is it. For most people, it's about once you get those qualifications, you then want to employ them in the service of others, because that's how it works, right? It's the same thing. You don't go and become a doctor just for the sake of getting a medical degree, right? There's almost a presumption that this knowledge is going to be applied towards serving other people. So in that context, the law is very, very correlated with the performance of the economy, both the financial and political economy, right, of any country. And the way the profession has evolved in this country over the last, for argument's sake, 100 years, has very much mirrored the politics of the day, the economic situation, and so on. There are 20,000 lawyers in a population of 50 million, right? Our population, so 50 million, our population is roughly 1/6 of the population of, let's say, the US. Now, I just want to Google how many lawyers there are in the US, because I don't have that number offhand. So I'm just checking number of lawyers in the US. There are 1.3 million lawyers in the US, right? 1.3 million lawyers in a population of roughly 330 odd million. You can do the maths, but in Kenya, we have 20,000 lawyers for a population of 50 million or 60 million. If you multiply 5 times, if we had the population of the US, we'd have 100,000 lawyers, or 120,000. The US has 10 times the number of lawyers per capita compared to Kenya. So you ask yourself, okay, does that actually mean anything? No, all it means is that the consumption of legal services in Kenya is way, way behind the consumption in other probably what you would call developed economies, right? I mean that's a fact. Okay. Now, why is the consumption low? Because legal services are considered to be luxury, right? It's only available to those who can afford it. And again, based on our history, that may not be untrue, that may not be a lie, that legal services are not accessible. Okay. So the point that I'm making is that there's a huge gap between supply and demand. Okay. If you're in Nairobi, it's possible that there are many lawyers. Okay. As soon as you step out of Nairobi, there are probably very few lawyers, right? Whether you go to Mombasa, Kisumu, whatever. And those are the bigger urban areas. If you go to small counties and so on, there are probably even fewer. So there has to be a sort of a shift in the way the legal profession is perceived, the way the population relates to legal services, right? Legal services have to become a need, right? Just the same way when you're sick, you go to see a doctor. When you have a problem, whether it's with a chief, whether it's with a traffic policeman, you need to believe that I need to get a lawyer, right? You have a small, a dispute with your employer, right? A dispute with your neighbor, and so on, okay? But this then becomes an issue of marketing, and then it goes to issues of leadership at the Law Society and where the focus is of the Law Society. Does it focus on being advocating for the rights of all Kenyans? Should it become much more of a trade union and an evangelist for the legal profession, right? And I don't know the answer to this because, and the only thing that can happen is that the leadership that is coming in to lead the legal profession must be very, very attuned to the issues of the young lawyers, right? I mean, they can only be addressed through the Law Society in terms of creation of opportunities, creating the demand for legal services, creating the opportunities, making sure that when legislation is passed, that there are built-in, sort of requirements for people to get services of a lawyer, etc. These are structural things and they involve lobbying, right? You're not going to sit back and somebody is going to just create work for you, okay? With digitization, of the registries, companies registries, land registries, and so on, the need for lawyers to be involved in some of these things is diminishing, obviously. So you have to look for other ways in which now lawyers can be meaningfully engaged, right? And this is an active process. Again, like I said, you can't sit back. If you look at, for example, like if you have the American Bar Association and some of these are very strong bars, right? They are actively lobbying. They're actively involved in political processes. They're actively involved in lawmaking, okay? Nothing is being left to chance. But you see, this is a paradigm shift, okay? I got into practice when I left employment. I had, how many jobs did I have? I think I had about 4 offers. I think I had a government job as a labor officer, because those days you just applied for everything. So I had Public Service Commission offering me a labor officer job in the Ministry of Labor. Kenya Power was offering me a legal officer job, and I had 2 offers from private law firms, right? And that was just the way things were at that time, right? I mean, I was one of the first. My admission number was obviously amongst the first 3,000 lawyers in Kenya. So, so it was a completely different environment. But people have to realize now that the profession has moved. Okay, so there are big structural things that need to be done by the Law Society in terms of making legal service accessible, getting rid of this remuneration order, allowing for market-based remuneration, which is already happening anyway, so that people don't think legal services are affordable, right? Let lawyers take legal services to the bottom of the pyramid and charge, prices commensurate with what people can afford. Let them create avenues for employment. Let's have, get lawyers to be given tax rebates for taking pupils, right? All sorts of structural things, because most people now, say, oh, if I take pupils, but it's such a cost and so on, is there a way in which this can be subsidized so that we can get more pupillage opportunities and so on, okay? But Law Society has to become a trade union for lawyers, okay? Much as it's a human rights, they do all this public interest litigation and all those good things, which are in the LSK Act, but really, really focus on the welfare of lawyers. But then the lawyers themselves also, unfortunately, like I said, because you're not divorced from the economy, and I'm sorry, I'm being a bit long, but it is what it is at the moment. So if you're going to be a young lawyer and you're planning your career out, you need to start asking yourself, what are the skill sets that are going to make me different, are going to put me ahead, right? Language skills, okay? Are you able to speak a different language, whether it's French or Spanish or whatever? You'll be shocked the number of jobs out there, both locally and internationally, where they're asking for language skills. Do you have another qualification, right? So a lot of lawyers are now taking up CPAs. Are you able to get a CFA qualification? Can you be an insolvency practitioner? Okay, widening your horizons and also offering wider skills, right? So that it's not just one dimensional, right? Can you speak Mandarin? Can you speak Chinese? Okay. And things like that, which are now making you more attractive in the workplace, right? So those are skills which are really now will set you apart as you're trying to chart your way into this profession. Okay. The business skills we've talked about, understanding how to run a business and so on. But you have to do things that now make you stick out, unfortunately, because this apparent saturation of the profession means that you have to be quite exceptional to get noticed, to get employment. And sometimes charting your way out is also looking and saying, you know what, let me start off in the judicial service. Let me start off in the DPP's office. The DPP is employing. Parliament is employing. Not everybody is going to get taken in by Anjawala or by Bowman's or Triple OK and so on, right? And at the starting salary level, you'll find that the public sector is actually quite competitive, right? I mean, in the parastatals and so on. So sometimes the career path, you might have to move sideways to go upwards, right? I don't have money for a master's degree. Let me go into the public service, the AG's office, do my 3 years or 5 years in the AG's office. I get a scholarship. I go do my master's. From there, the world opens up, right? Again, being deliberative and saying, these are the steps that I'm going to take.
I'm going to read the questions in the chat. So the first one, Mr. Mokwa is addressing this question to Senior Mallowah, and the question is, at what point did you start specializing as an advocate? How many years did it take? And what opportunities are there in climate change litigation and the area of carbon finance?
Right. Okay. So when it comes to specializing, okay, okay, my journey is a bit different. So interesting because obviously I practiced for a couple of years and then I went and did a very specialized sort of master's, which was more in financial services law. Securities, capital markets, and things of that nature, pensions, insurance, financial sector regulation, more or less. And off the back of that is how I got myself into public service, just by having specialized, some sort of specialization in terms of a master's degree. It just happened that there was a lot of reforms going on in the financial sector, okay, in Kenya. So we were reforming the pensions industry, the insurance industry, capital markets, and there was a need for those skills. And that's how I ended up in the public sector, okay? And so, the Retirement Benefits Act, the Insurance Act, and setting up the various regulators. So I was all involved in that stuff. That's how I ended up in the public service. While in the public service, again, you then realize that there are certain skill sets that you need to help you navigate that system. And that's how I ended up getting a qualification in public policy, right, and public management. Again, just to be able to do that better. So again, from there, then, it's sort of, like I said, based on the qualifications you have, it opens certain doors. And when I left the public service, I was doing very different things, intellectual property and stuff. But when I came back into practice, the whole idea was, what are the emerging areas of law? Where do we see the law going, right? And because if you keep your ear to the ground and you're sort of like listening to what's happening, you could see that climate change was going to become, and sustainability was going to be a big issue. We set up in 2017. So we set up the first dedicated practice. We also set up the first dedicated technology, media, and telecommunications practice. Okay. A lot of firms at that time, all this was part of their commercial law offering. So we set up those two distinct practice areas, and then just made sure that we trained people, did the right, went for courses, got certifications, and so on. So the thing about lawyers is that you don't really, the thing is that you know how to learn. And so long as you're able to learn, you can actually specialize at whatever point in time. I mean, if I wanted to go back to litigation today, it would probably take me 6 months of really intense application to get back into litigation. Okay, because I haven't looked at civil procedure and things like that for a long time. But it's a matter of just applying yourself, right? And seeing whether, is there a possibility, is there growth in this area? Right now, this area of climate change and so on is still not fully exploited, and sustainability. And that is because the legal framework for compliance is not yet fully developed, right? We have passed laws, we have not passed regulations. Once those regulations come into effect, there'll be a huge push towards compliance, regulatory compliance, and so on. So there's still opportunities developing. The whole carbon trading, if the funds, these COP meetings, funds start flowing, the North or the West agrees to start paying for the pollution, there'll be a lot of developments around that area. There'll be a lot of money floating around looking for projects and so on. So these areas are all emerging areas. Right now, taxation is very hot. Tax is really, really hot because, with the weaponization of KRA, they'll reach a point where people can only take so much. I mean, right now, there's a lot of ADR around tax, but the tax code in Kenya is getting much more and more complicated. And so we are going to end up at some point like the Americans, where everybody has an accountant and everybody has a tax lawyer. Okay. Just because of the complications around tax. So one can specialize so long as you can see the trend and you're prepared to apply yourself and to learn something new, then you can specialize.
Well, thank you so much, Senior Mallowah, for that answer. I will move on to the next question, which is addressed to Councillor Njeru. When you speak of supervisory structure, how does that work in a firm that is just starting out with young lawyers, or does this call for peer review? I'll take it up again. This is Elna Wambua. My question is to Councillor Njeru. When you speak of supervisory structure, how does that work in a firm that is just starting out with young lawyers, or does this call for peer review?
Thank you for the question. I think there's always an element of peer reviewing your work in terms of supervisory structure, because, like I began by saying, one of the purposes is to fine-tune your work and to ensure that you're always alert as to what is going on in your firm and what is going on with your practice. So the first one, obviously, it calls for peer review. Number two, I'd say that you have to go back to what I talked about in terms of the management structure. Then you will have to find who is the immediate supervisor, depending on whatever department it is in your firm, depending on what issue has arisen that requires now that supervisory structure to be employed in that particular instance. But I'd also add that you're not constrained by the firm. You can also reach out to other lawyers. You can also reach out to other senior lawyers. You can reach out in terms of, this is my work, this is something that I'm planning to file. Is it in the proper forum? Is it properly done? Is it, do you notice any issue? I'm sure most seniors are always willing to help, and this is part of the mentorship that they usually speak about. You can venture out and ask your friends. So in terms of a supervisory structure, there has to be a way to check so as to avoid the danger of having work that is done, reviewed, and filed by a single advocate, and work that whenever there's a mistake, there could have been an opportunity to remedy it, but then you didn't take it. And this may not necessarily just relate to your briefs. It can even relate to something as easy as keeping each other accountable in terms of your relationship with your clients, in terms of your turnaround time, in terms of your timekeeping, in terms of how you do your work. It is just the structure is what you create it for what works best for you.
Thank you so much, my senior there, Njeru, for that response. I'm seeing we have time has run over. So I'm not saying I don't want for this session to go beyond that, because it was just supposed to be for 1 hour for the respect of your time. So I'm assuming there's no other question. In 3, 2, 1. Okay. Thank you so much to my two seniors, Mr. Mallowah and Mr. Njeru, for this session. I have personally learned a lot. As I said, I'm just 2 years into practice, and this session was for me. Thank you. And with that, once again, thank you so much to our panelists for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today, and also to our participants. We are hoping we'll have another chance to continue with this conversation. So, and with that, allow me to close it at this point and to wish you a good evening.